Ray.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Corey Stolzenbach here, February 19th, 2015. It is Thursday morning. I'm joined now by a very special guest. He was a center fielder and first baseman, played for 7 different major league teams, batting champion in 1982, world champion in 1971, a 7-time All-Star. He's now a motivational speaker. He was called Scoop in his playing days. He is Al Oliver. He's joining me right now. And Al, good to talk to you. I hope everything's going well with this cold weather.
Well, believe it or not, it is. What was really surprising more than anything else is that living in southern Ohio, we very seldom get the brunt of any type of snow like they do up north, like in Columbus and further north, definitely in Cleveland and Buffalo area is always that way. But over the last couple of days, we have gotten snow. But one good thing about it is it hasn't been that bad as far as traveling and getting around town, although the kids are enjoying it because they're out of school, and it looks like they're not going to go to school tomorrow neither. So, other than that, things have been going on well.
Well, speaking of kids, I hope your grandson or grandsons, I understand they play sports, so I hope you're doing well with that, and they're doing okay, and they're playing well and everything.
Yes, my oldest grandson, Sky, is a senior, and, of course, Ty is a sophomore. And, of course, Sky is the very talented athlete in all 3 sports, and what we're doing now is trying to look around to see what school he's going to end up going to. I know someone asked me the other day in what sport, and unfortunately, he's a 3-sport athlete, but he's ruled out football, so now it's going to come down to basketball and baseball. And so they begin the tournament on the 28th, and so I feel that probably by the time the tournament, the basketball tournament is over, and or his halfway through his high school baseball season, we'll have a pretty good idea of what sport that he'll be going to school and where he will be going to school. But he's been fun to watch over the last 3 years in high school. I really have enjoyed it, and I'm just glad to see him do well. He's a great kid, and when you have great kids today who stayed out of trouble and very manable, and he's easy to, coach, but he doesn't need much coaching from me. He's a natural, and I'm just hoping that we have enough options, which I know we will. The decision, of course, will be his, but like I told him, if he gets in a pinch, I'm there to help him out.
Well, I wish him and you all the best. That's a perfect transition to us beginning. Let's go back to 1964. You're 17 years old, just graduated from high school, and you played baseball and basketball yourself because you had a scholarship to play basketball at Kent State University. However, the Pirates gave you a tryout, and you instead signed with them. What did you do at your tryout that impressed them so much?
I really don't know, and the reason why I answer that way is because what I did in the trial camp, I was doing all the way through from Little League all the way up. But for whatever reason, in high school, and even in Junior American Legion ball, I think the scouts might have had a blindfold over their eyes. I didn't know, what they were thinking about at the time. But actually, when I had signed the basketball scholarship in May of '64, I was going on to Kent State University to play basketball, and I really didn't even think about professional baseball because, the scouts weren't around. There were some that were around, but they didn't seem to show much interest. And a teammate of mine at that time was Larry Heisel, and they were looking at Larry, and rightfully so, because Larry could hit balls 500 feet, and, he might strike out 2 times, but I was always that type of hitter that, I was 2 for 3, 2 for 4, and still hit home runs. But all of a sudden I went to the Pirate Trout Camp down in Salem, Virginia, in which I was not supposed to go because the Phillies had told me do not go because they knew that if I went, that somehow the Pirates would grab me. Well, I had to get permission from my Junior American Legion coach because I was at 17 to go to the trial camp. And I never would get him telling me, he said, Al, I'm going to sign this paper, but you're not coming back. how he got there. Because all the people that were involved in that situation have passed on. And I do not know how they got Dad down there. But, I ran well, I hit well, and, the things that I had been doing. And so finally, I guess they liked me and decided to sign me. And in that contract, the key was Dad wanted me to go to college. So in the contract, it read that they would pay for my education. But if I stayed out 2 years, the scholarship was nullified. And of course, once you start playing ball, it's tough to go back to school. So I was just doing the things that I've always done, and then they feel something about me that they liked. I guess coming from a Christian home, they felt that I wouldn't cause any problems, and plus I was productive on the field.
You were definitely a great hitter for sure. Growing up, how much baseball did you play as opposed to basketball?
It was not even. When it was basketball season, I played basketball. When it was baseball, I played baseball. And, growing up in the community in which I grew up in, I wasn't the only good athlete. It seemed like we had very many athletes. Some slipped through the cracks. I almost did. But everybody was good, and the competition was so strong that you had to be good. I recall when we had basketball games, down at the park, and when we played in, if you lost, you may not play until tomorrow, because that's the kind of teams that we had in basketball. The competition was so stiff, and of course Larry Heisel did the same thing that I did. The following year, he decided to go to Ohio State on a basketball scholarship. Then later, he changed his mind and signed with the Phillies. But we have so many athletes that have come out of Portsmouth, and some slipped through the cracks. And it's amazing that the people who have come out of this area, I can give you a history of the people who have come out of this area, which would shock a lot of people. And they're big-name people. And so I just happen to have come from an area that produced outstanding athletes.
As a follow-up to that, would you please mind telling me who some of those big names are that you're referring to?
Yes. Number one, Roy Rogers was raised here. Number two, and I got to put him number one, is Branch Rickey. And we all know, maybe we all don't know, but Branch Rickey is responsible for Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball. And so that's the biggest name. I've always kid people along the way. If I'd have gotten 4,000 hits, I still would have been at least, at worst, number three behind Roy Rogers and Branch Rickey. But, it's a great thing, for guys like that to have come from my hometown. I mentioned Larry Heisel, who had a 5-minute career. Team tennis with the Oakland A's. All three of us played on the same Junior American Legion team. Rocky Nelson, first baseman for the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1960, when they knocked off the Yankees. Dale Rice, a former manager and player, of course, with the St. Louis Cardinals back in the 40s and 50s, and went on to manage the Angels. And Chuck Ely, who was a great quarterback, who went on to Toledo and went on to the Canadian League to win a championship. And we have guys named Kirk Gentry, who played for the Chicago Bears in the late 60s. And it's just been a turnstile of athletes, along with umpires. The great Gibsons, Terry Kraft. We've just had a lot of great athletes who really shined once they left here. They were good before they left, but that is just a few of the guys. I can name a couple more, but some might get lost because they weren't really named players. But the ones that I mentioned, and of course, Branch Rickey will always stand out when it comes down to baseball. And not only baseball, but a world situation. I put him up there with all the great icons in
Yes, and Branch Rickey also was a pioneer in the farm system, too. And for our listeners out there, he's talking about Portsmouth, which is his hometown. Let's talk about September 1968, Al. It's the 14th, and you were called up to the majors, or you found out you were going to get called up. Unfortunately, however, your father also passed away that same day. I know it was very tough for you, considering you also lost your mother at 11. And your father was, I understand, a huge influence on your life growing up. When did you find out what happened? What did happen?
Well, Dad worked at the Harvest and Walker Brickyard. And, Dad was a physical specimen. And, as people know, back in the day, you had the steel mills, you had the brickyards, and he worked at the brickyard. And so over the years that he worked out there, the dust that was, at the brickyards, eventually it had accumulated. And, it got in his body and he developed silicosis. And, quite a few people who worked at the brickyard went that route. And so he lingered on for about 2 or 3 years. And eventually, I knew in 1968 when I played in Columbus, which happened to be a blessing because I was close to home. I was an hour and a half away from home. So I could always come back home and check on him. But I knew in 1968 that sometime along the way that I was going to lose him. And so it was something that I was all right with, although I did get off to a slow start in Columbus because from time to time I thought about the possibility of him leaving here. But the one thing that kept me together was that I was raised in a very spiritual home. And that is what kept me and has kept me to this day. So all of a sudden I got a call from my aunt saying that he's had a turn for the worst. I packed my car up and drove home. And of course, knowing that, I knew that when I left my dad's funeral, in which I went back to make the arrangements for the funeral, I knew I was going to report to Fort Phil as a pilot. He never saw me play, except in the minor leagues. He saw me play one game, and I got 4 hits, and that was at Gastonia, North Carolina, in 1965. But the fact of the matter is that when I left home after the funeral, I drove to Pittsburgh and reported to Fort Phil and became a major leaguer. But the one good thing that I can always lean on, it was the fact that anything that I said that I would do, I could do. And he had a lot of confidence in me. And his only thing was, before he passed away, was to take care of my brother and take care of my sister. And so that I did. Unfortunately, April 28th last year, I lost a brother. He's my youngest. He was the youngest of the 3 of us. But I was able to move on there because of the spiritual side of me. And I'm just glad I was raised in that household and in that community where most people had that strong spiritual and faith in God. And so that is what has kept me all these years. So I dealt with that okay. I knew that I had to go. I had a mission, and that's the way Dad would have wanted it.
My sincere condolences to you over the passing of your brother. And I know your younger sister, was actually pregnant at the time around his passing, and you raised her and the kids, so I do commend you for that. Your rookie season in 1969 was your first full season in the majors. You finished runner-up to Ted Sizemore for Rookie of the Year. I know how important your father was, so I was asking you, I'm wondering, did his passing at all give you an uplift to you as a player?
I didn't catch that last word.
Did his passing at all lift you up as a player?
Oh, it kept me going. Yes, I knew that I couldn't falter. I knew that the way I was raised, he would have wanted me to go on. And I had a mission because I had a younger brother, I had a younger sister. And I had to set the tempo and set the example for the 2 of them. So that kept me going. And that was key. Throughout my
Well, now let's talk about 1971, a very special year, especially in Pittsburgh, the Steel City. September 1st, you were part of the first ever all-minority black lineup in Major League Baseball, or all-minority lineup in baseball history. Considering this is Black History Month, how often do you think about something like that this time of year?
Well, on occasions, and the reason why I think about it, and when I do think about it, I'm really surprised that people don't talk about that. They never have. Whether it's Black History Month or just at any time. Most people, when it's mentioned, they say, "Oh, really?" Or some people, their comments are, "That's strange because I never hear anything about it," which is true, and that's part of baseball history. And I'm just surprised that someone hasn't grabbed that, or many people haven't grabbed that, to bring that to the forefront so people can be aware of baseball history. It has never been done prior to that, and it hasn't been done since. And so I'm just glad that I was a part of that history. And when I look back at it, I feel good about it. Danny Murtaugh put the lineup card up, and like you said, he felt that was a team that could win that night. And I will always believe that. I don't think he wrote the lineup to say, well, okay, I have 9 minorities out there. So I give him a lot of credit for being honest about it and being colorblind about that situation, especially at that time. Both in the 60s and 70s, we still haven't gotten over totally racism, and we still haven't really gotten over it today. But at that time, I give him a lot of credit, and I'm just glad that I was part of it.
Yes, you guys were facing the Phillies, and Doc Ellis was on the mound for you guys, and Woody Fryman was pitching for Philadelphia, and you guys won that game. And Murtaugh was asked by the press about that, and he said that his job was to put out the best athletes on the field, and all 9 of them happened to be a minority, and that's what he said. However, Al, from my understanding, even though you guys got along great in the clubhouse, you guys all had great relationships, I understand the fans, though, they wrote to the Pirates, and they didn't like what happened that night.
Okay, and I did hear that, but I didn't hear anything about that until maybe 10 to 15 years later. Although I know some of the players had heard about that because I heard them, relay it on to me. But from a personal standpoint, I never heard that. I one of those players, it seemed like I always lived in the closet anyway, and so I didn't hear all that negative stuff. But, yes, that is possible. And to this day, I really can't comment on it because I was totally unaware that there were repercussions about non-minorities. But, that's part of life. Some people, have the issues, with race, and others are fine with it. But, it's unfortunate that whoever had issues about that, I just say more power to them, and I just pray for them.
The 1971 World Series, the Orioles were up 2-0 against the Pirates. Then it moves to Pittsburgh, and everything changes. They win Game 3, and then is the night before your 25th birthday, the first night game in World Series history, October 13th of 71, I believe. And Pat Dobson's on the mound, and he's pitching. And you drive in a run. You had 2 RBIs that series, but let's talk about that 4th game, the first night game in Fall Classic history when you're facing Dobson, and you drive in Willie Stargell on a bloop double over the head of the late Paul Blair. It was past him. What'd you do in that at-bat? Because I remember it was a full count at-bat, and you persisted and persisted. You kept fouling off pitches. What was your strategy right there? Were you just trying to get a hit? What was going on right there when you're facing Dobson?
Well, my usual strategy was to try to hit the ball hard somewhere, and that's the only strategy that I've ever had since I played baseball. And when I look back at the tape, and I remember when my brother was living, about 10 years ago, we watched the tape, and Dobson threw a pitch that was inside that I took. And going by the film, it looked like it could have being called a strike, it gave me more life. And as it turned out, he jammed me, and I was fortunate enough to get the ball over the infield, and then it took a high hop over Paul Blair's head. And, you know, when Paul Blair played a shallow center field, in which he did, and getting that hit might have been key to turn that series around, because we needed that game and that win. And to be a part of history again, the first World Series night game, and more importantly, to win that game because it was key. I'm just glad when I look back at some of the historical moments in my career that I was a part of, and seeing the other players become part of history that I played with. It was a great feeling, and I'm just glad that we had the type of team that could bounce back from several losses against a great Baltimore team.
And that was the only World Series championship team you were a part of. However, you made your debut with the Pirates in '68, and you would play there until '77. And pretty much almost any given year, they were competitive throughout your tenure. I think the fewest amount of games they won when you were there was 80, and they went to the playoffs several times. So what are some other years when you played in Pittsburgh that didn't go all the way, but you thought they could have, that they had a real shot at it?
In 1973, it came down to the last game, and San Diego had to come back at the end of the season to play us. And so we had an outside shot. And if I'm not mistaken, St. Louis was playing the Mets. And I don't know the total scenario of that, but we needed one team to lose, and everybody was playing the Mets. And they played it out. And during that game, I do recall, we found out during the game that we didn't have a chance. But that was one year that I thought that we had a chance to win it in Pittsburgh. That's the only other year that I could think of outside of 1972, where we lost to the Reds on a wild pitch. And that was a great team that we had. We were on our way to winning back-to-back World Series. At least we had a chance to win that second World Series in 1972. But all of a sudden, Johnny Bench comes up and he hits a home run to right field. And, you know, John didn't hit a lot of home runs, especially in right field. And then eventually we lost with a wild pitch. But I would say 72 and 73 were years that if we would got into the World Series, I think our chances would have been good. The Pirates have always had a history. Once they get there, they usually win.
You guys are very competitive throughout, as I said. However, in 1972, I think it was December 31st, there was an MLB.com article a few years back that said that Clemente was a great example for young players, Roberto Clemente, and that he was big on your professional life. In what ways?
In the way that my dad would have been. Roberto Clemente understood me quite better than anyone, outside, of course, my dad. What Roberto saw in me when I came up was this young, confident, self-assuring young man who could play. And some people didn't quite get it, what it was like to be confident, what it was like to be self-assuring. They missed the boat. Personally, I always felt that that's the way all people should be. Confident, feel good about themselves, no better than anyone, but just as good. And he saw that in me because he went through similar things himself when he first came up. You know, people took him the wrong way. And so that's the reason why we clicked. And I know he came over to me one year, and it was 1970, when I was being platooned, which, you know, I didn't quite get that. And he told me to stay in shape, because one day you'll get a chance to play every day. And once you do, you'll be one of the best players to ever play this game. And unfortunately, you know, he didn't get a chance to see my career. But those words coming from him did
You talked earlier about 1973, and you guys did have a good season there. You won the World Series 2 years earlier. One of the biggest reasons why you won that World Series was because of Steve Blass. However, in 1973, he totally lost his control. He had a meltdown on the mound. He was walking far more batters than he struck out. As a teammate of his, what were you seeing from the mound from Steve Blass?
Well, going back to the World Series, that had to be one of the best pitched World Series games in history. You know, of course, people don't talk about that game. You know, they have players who go to other World Series games. But, of course, you know, once Steve lost his control, it's something that none of us as teammates have or had no idea of why he lost his control. You know, we were trying to figure it out, but none of us could. And really the only person that can answer that question is Steve Blass and God. It's something that we never talked about, and it was an unfortunate situation where a guy had pinpoint control, and then all of a sudden, you know, he lost it. And to this day, it's something that we don't talk about. And I went back for an old-timers game for a reunion of that 71 World Championship team 7 years back. And he went to the mound. And all the players were kind of like holding their breath. And Steve said, you know what? I'm going to take this ball and I'm just going to wing it. I'm going to air it out. And saying, yeah, let's catch it. And he threw a strike. Good fastball, too. And so what it came down to, he didn't think about it. I think he did a lot of thinking back, you know, when he didn't have his control. And we all know that when we start thinking sometimes, it goes against us. But to this day, we really don't know what happened to Steve. But the whole thing I can say about Steve is he's never lost his sense of humor.
Going back to Danny Murtaugh, you're not the first former Pirate I've interviewed who played under Murtaugh. I've asked them all if he should be in the Hall of Fame. They've all said yes. Do you agree with them?
I totally agree with it. And the more and more I look at this Hall of Fame thing over the last 10, 15 years, there's no doubt in my mind that he should be there. You know, of course, he won in 60, and of course he won in 71. He was a winner, and I know, from a personal standpoint, that he belongs. You know, the intangibles that he had, he knew how to handle players, and I have to agree that he managed well. There were just so many things that we as players knew about his management ability. He knew when to set down a player when they needed a day off. Although on the Pirates, none of us wanted a day off, but he knew when to set us down and we would come back strong. But yes, I do believe that he should be strongly considered, not only considered, but I think he was a Hall of Fame manager as far as I'm concerned.
Of course, Al, if we're talking about the Hall of Fame with 7 All-Stars, more than 2,700 hits, we can't forget you either in the discussion.
Well, I guess that's another color. You know, I don't talk much about the Hall of Fame because mainly it's out of my hand. You know, the numbers are there, and so that's the kind of way that I've left it. The Hall of Fame writers have spoken. The Hall of Fame players and executives have spoken on the Veterans Committee. And so that pretty much says it all, that they feel that I'm not deserving. And so that's something that I can live with, and I have lived with it for a long time. But unfortunately, you know, as I travel, you know, around doing motivational speaking and all, I always get that. You know, I always get to, well, why aren't you in? When are you going? But the most important thing is, like I tell them, and fan validation is very important to me. And I've gotten that from the fans, and I totally appreciate it. And that's the most important thing. You know, I don't look to go into the Hall. So if I ever go in, my goal now
It must not have been easy when you were traded from the Pirates to the Rangers in December of 1977.
That was tough. I was married there. Both my kids were born there. I was a huge part of the community. And when you have all those things going for you, and yet you hadn't come nearly close to your potential as a player, my many years were ahead of me. And it's just unfortunate that I didn't get a chance to spend all 18 years of mine in Pittsburgh. Because the fans were great to me, they treated me with respect, and even when I go back there today, it's like I never left. It's absolutely amazing. They make you very humble. I mean, they really do. It's great going back to Pittsburgh. They do not forget you.
And that's wonderful for sure. And you played Sorry, go ahead.
No, I said it is.
Yes, and you played 18 seasons, and you're somebody who did very well in his later years. You're 35 years old. In 1982, you really had it going on. You won the batting title. You had the most hits, the most doubles. You also won the RBI crown. You finished third in MVP voting. Dale Murphy won that award. The Braves won the NL East, and the Expos finished in third. If Montreal makes the playoffs again that year, Al, am I talking to the 1982 NL MVP right now if the Expos make the playoffs?
Yes. There's no question if we would win our division. With the year that I had, 1982, I think I had led the league in 5 offensive categories, which had not been done since Stan Musial in 1946 or 47. So some people felt that with the offensive output, I still had a good chance of winning the MVP. But Dale had a great year, and his team won, and so when you win, then it's to your advantage. And when you lose, they can always hold that against you. And so I had no problem with it. It was just one of those things that happened. And, sometimes things don't happen the way that you would like them to happen, so you just move on. But it was a very good year for me, and the fans of Montreal were very appreciative.
You played there, you played for the Phillies, the Giants, the Dodgers before making your last stop in Toronto, and you bounced around a bit, and looking at the Los Angeles Times from 1985, I know that you didn't always have the greatest relationship with the media, and some of your teammates said things about you as well, and you once said that the news media can make you a god or make you a devil, but I don't seem to understand why it seems like you guys didn't always get along, because from what I've seen and read from your interviews, you didn't come across as that type of player to me, Al.
Right. I never had any problem with the news media. I don't know where that came from. I was probably one of the most cordial players that you could find. There might have been a couple times where something was written, and I missed that to them once or twice, and that's it. I've never had any problem with the news media. So I don't know where that came from. I never had any problem with the players, and I don't know where that came from. The only thing I can say, wherever it started, you can chalk that up as falsehood.
And with 85 being your last season, you got one final trip to the playoffs with Toronto, and you had a great series. And if you guys won that series, you may have been ALCS MVP. You got the game-winning RBI in Game 2 that scored Lloyd Mosby, and then again in Game 4 you hit Dan Quisenberry very well. What was it about Quiz you were able to get his number in that series?
I don't know. I think that, number one, by the way that he drew from down under. And so his ball comes into a left-hand hitter. And I think that was the key. Where if he was left-handed who threw like that, it might have been different. But it seems like I picked up his ball, well. And I knew also that he is the type of pitcher, and was the type of pitcher that he would challenge hitters. And so I always like those pitchers who like to challenge
He was a great closer for sure. But in that series, Al, the Blue Jays were favored. You guys had home field. You were up 3-1. You won more games in the regular season. Where did it all go wrong?
I don't know. When you had a kind of talent that we had, and you have 3-1, I think it came down to the lack of timely hitting. Because we had the pitching and we had the defense. But it came down to timely hitting. And I think that's the thing that that failed us. And we could not give Kansas City a second chance because they had those scrappy type players. Guys who hit the ball, guys who kept the ball in play. They didn't strike out a lot. And that's this kind of team that they had. You couldn't give them a second chance because they were a team that was led by the late great, not the late great, but the, I always call him, he's made as far as his playing days, but King George, Brett, whenever you have a team, with George in it, you know you got a team that's going to battle you, from time to time and day in and day out. And so the combination of the two, the type of team that they had and the lack of timely hitting that we had was the reason why Kansas City went on to the World Series.
They ended up being the Cardinals. They were down 3-1 in that series also, and they ended up winning that one too. So I guess it was just destiny. But after they won the pennants, apparently after they won on TV, they were showing you scowling. I don't know if it was just a situation that the series fell apart. Who or what in particular were you scowling at?
Oh, I was keyed off. All the frustration throughout my career, the way I was used, the things that had happened to me throughout my career, it finally came to a head. And it was just that simple. And I'm surprised that I held it in all those years. Yes, I wasn't treated the way I thought I should have been treated. And everybody who followed my career and was around realized that. And that's what it came down to. But at least I didn't take it out on a human being. I took it out on the bat rack. And, believe me, all players, a lot of players have done that. But maybe it's because it was on national TV. But I vented it. I got off my chest. And if I had to do that all over again, I'd have done the same thing. Frustration finally came to a head because I knew that was going to be my last game.
Okay, just a few more questions before we close this out. You were managed by Bobby Cox in Toronto. Did you have any idea he'd become the manager he would? What was he like back then when he managed you?
Honest. I know when I first came there, he said that I would be platooned. And he was honest about that, which I respected that. At least he told me up front. And so I expected that. So he was easy to talk to. And that's all you can ask from a manager. If he's honest with you and you can go to his office and talk to him, hey, that's what it's all about. Because sometimes managers just really don't want to get from a player. But he wasn't like that. He was always open. His door was open. And he was okay as far as I was concerned. He deserved to be in the Hall of Fame.
That's good. One of the best for sure. I know that I read that you thought you could have played like 5 or 6 more years in the DH and possibly gotten to 3,000 hits. However, there was collusion, and you tried looking for work, but you couldn't, and therefore you retired. I think it was February of '86 you retired.
What had happened, I knew that, as far as the DH, that's something that I could have done easily for at least 5 more years because of my conditioning. I still could run, and I still could hit. Nothing really slowed up with me, and the reason why I was a professional racquetball player, and I played racquetball during all season, that kept me in great shape. So if I'd have been given opportunity as an everyday DH, that is, to like a Paul Molitor, I could have helped some team along the way because I had definitely a lot of hits left in the gas tank. But I just wasn't given that opportunity, and they shut the door on me. And part of life, and it's something that I don't look back at with any anger or animosity, because that's part of life, and I'm just used to that. You know, I was used to disappointments, but it was hard for me to get angry at people and hold grudges, which I do not.
Okay, last but not least, here we are, February 19, 2015. Players, catchers, the teams are all starting to report for spring training. What are your predictions for this year?
You know what? I really don't follow the game that much, except from playoff time and during that time, but I like to see the players in it. Definitely the National League. And that's pretty much as far as I can go right now. Probably if we talk maybe a month later, I'll probably give you that American League team. But right now, I'm hoping for the Pirates to get back in the World Series, because not only the players deserve it, but the fans in the Steel City does.
Well, Al Oliver, thank you so very much, and thank you to the listeners. He had a new book that came out about last year, Life is a Hit, Don't Strike Out. You can order it on his website as well as other merchandise, al-oliver.com. You can also follow Al on Twitter at alscoop16. That's capital A, the rest lowercase, all one word, alscoop16. You can follow him on Twitter. Thank you so very much, Al. Pleasure talking to you. I'm Corey Stolzenbach. Hope you have a great day, Al. Thank you so very much.
Hey, Corey. Same to you.
Thank you, sir. I'll send you a copy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.